Morning. It is 9 o'clock in the morning. I have been for a run, I've had breakfast, taken the kids to school. It's now coffee time. And before I get into all the questions for this week's Q&A Monday, for which there have been loads, so thank you. I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who sent messages of kind of support and lots of love on Friday after the video I did explaining why I'm no longer working for Sky at F1 races. I didn't want you to think that was a kind of, a cry for help or a sort of a sob story I was giving. It definitely wasn't. I've been knocked back and had things that have not worked out how I thought they were going to so many times in my life, and we all have. And I really do always have a positive, or always try and have a positive attitude on these things. And when you get knocked back for whatever reason, if something doesn't work out how you originally thought it was going to, I always try and see that as an opportunity. I see it as a chance to do something different, and that's exactly what I see this as. Yes, I would love to be at all of the Grand Prix because that is what I've always done. But look, there've also been lots of opportunities that have come along that I haven't been able to take because I've been either away at races or because I've been linked to Sky exclusively. So perhaps some of those opportunities I'll now be able to take. So anyway, the future is great, the future's bright. Please don't feel sorry for me if you are, but thank you so much for all the love and all the messages over the weekend. That was lovely. Right, Q&A Monday. Loads of questions, as I say. Thanks very much to everybody who sent them in. I will crack through as many as I can. Roll the sting. Right, well, let's start with a big one, because this is a question that I can't even attribute to any one person, because so many people have mentioned it, have asked it. It's the question that's on everybody's lips. Was the right thing to do for Mercedes to switch Bottas and Hamilton during the Russian Grand Prix? It's also a very difficult question to answer, or there are more than one answer to it. That's the point here. Look, within the current set of regulations, within the current way that Formula One operates, with this whole big team side of the sport, the Constructors' Championship, the Drivers' Championship, the fact that these big teams are incredibly corporate and run by massive corporations, the fact that people like Toto Wolff have to answer to the board of Mercedes when making decisions like that, and when they're displaying the results of what they do through the Formula One team. My view, if I was Toto, I would have done exactly the same thing. I would have switched those two drivers. I would have made sure that Lewis, who's my championship contender, wins the race. Valtteri comes in second to bring us maximum constructors points. But I want to make sure there's absolutely no doubt that Lewis Hamilton will win this year's Drivers' World Championship. And you can look at it and say, well, he's already had a 40-point advantage. There's no way Vettel's going to win. That's easy to say now, but if there was a situation where one of their drivers crashed, or they had an engine failure or a tyre blowout, on the last lap of the race, any of those things could happen without any warning, and they could happen, completely irrelevant to any of the sort of hard work and meticulous preparation that Mercedes do. You could run over some debris on the circuit, and it could cost you. And I know that 40 points is a decent margin, but 50 points is a better margin. And 50 points goes some way to putting it out of reach. That's 2 DNFs they can afford to have now with Lewis Hamilton and still be leading this championship. I would have done the same thing. Now, if you're looking at this from a fan's perspective, completely get it. It ruined the race, it overshadowed the race, it's not sporting. It is not the way that either Lewis wanted to win that race, and it's certainly not the way that most fans want to see a race decided. So I get that as well. It's definitely not how Valtteri wanted the race to play out, and I thought the race was going to play out. It seems very strange to me that wasn't a predetermined scenario from within the Mercedes camp, that if that was the situation heading towards the latter part of the race, that's exactly what they would do. Because then there's no kind of ambiguity over it. That's what's going to happen, guys. Deal with it. And Valtteri's an absolute pro. He's a brilliant teammate to Lewis Hamilton. He's an absolute team player. He's only got a 1-year contract, so of course he's going to be a team player. but that's the way it works. So if you're going to argue and say we don't want this in Formula 1, it needs to be stamped out, totally understand that viewpoint, but it needs to be stamped out along with a complete reset of the way that Formula 1 works, a complete reset of the regulations and the regulatory framework that F1 operates within. Right, on the subject of Sky F1, Racy Boy asks, "Hey Mark, how many personnel does Sky F1 send to a race? I was surprised they're flying back to the UK and not straight to Japan." Well, so they have, I guess, on site, and it used to be a lot. When they first started up, they were taking more people than the Formula 1 teams were, over 70 people. That's reduced a lot now, and part of their production is now remote. So the gallery, or the sort of the operations centre, which always used to be at the track, is now happening back at base. So they've got this remote operation, so some of the staff that used to travel are now back at Sky HQ. I think the on-site number, I don't know what the actual head count is, but I would say it's probably around about 50. And that includes all the sort of technical facilitators that set up and rig everything. Not all of the team will get to go home, because all of the tech crew will go straight from packing up on Sunday night as soon as they go off air to de-rigging everything, packing it all into the containers, sending it off to Japan, and they will go straight the next morning, on Monday morning, off to Japan to receive that shipment and start unpacking it and rigging for the next event. So it's not everybody that goes home in between races. F1 Quiz says, if the race in Sochi had been red flagged with over 70%, or is it 75%, of the race done, who would have won the race? Max was leading the race at that moment, but he hadn't changed his tyres yet. Well, the regulation states that if you get a red flag beyond I think it is 75%, beyond the 75% mark of the race, that would then count as an absolute race result, so full points would be awarded. And the regulation states that if the red flag comes out, we've had this in the past, the race result is taken from last time they all crossed the line on the lap before the red flag comes out, and whatever order they're in at that point, that is the race result. So yes, if the red flag had come out at that point, Max Verstappen, leading the race despite the fact he hadn't made a pit stop, would have won that Grand Prix. Ken D59 says, "Hey Mark, this is probably a dumb question. There are no such thing as dumb questions in F1, Ken. Who are the people that stand next to a driver with the handheld recorder during interviews?" They are the team's PR representatives. So generally most teams, and certainly the bigger teams, will have a PR rep assigned to each driver who kind of looks after their schedule over the race weekend, who deals with the media, or is in like an intermediary between the media and the driver. They'll set up the interviews. That's the person that we as media have to deal with when we want to request an interview with the driver. And then when they're standing there with that little dictaphone in the pen, the post-race pen, for example, recording what's being said, lots of people actually ask me this. It's definitely not a dumb question. Why are they recording what's being said? And they're recording it for a couple of reasons. One, it means that there is no ambiguity about what's been said. So if there's a dispute over something that's been published later, or a quote that's been attributed to a driver, they can have it. They've got it recorded, so they can go back and check, did he actually say that? And the other reason is that they use those quotes that are rattled out in the pen there. They use them for their own press releases. So the team will regurgitate some of that content that they've recorded on their dictaphone to issue a press release or a post-race statement themselves, without having to then go and sit down with the driver again and ask him all the same questions. So that's the reason. Jonathan Moore says, do the dogs get a bath every day? No, they don't. Carl S says, what are your thoughts about the level of PU restrictions, power unit restrictions? Do you feel that under the current system it pushes F1 to be more endurance than it used to be when there were no restrictions? Yeah, 100%. It definitely does. F1 is definitely an endurance event these days, and it used to be a fine balance between endurance and outright performance, and that's when I felt we were really pushing the technology, or that kind of engine technology, to the absolute limit. We are pushing it to limits, of course, now, just different limits. So Yes, it's 100% more endurance than it used to be. I guess that's up to you whether you think that's a good or a bad thing. David Calvert says, with the larger tyres in 2021, will we see bigger brakes, or will the current ones still be suitable to produce the heat needed to switch the tyres on? So you're talking about the low profile tyres that are penned in for 2021. Essentially what that means is you have a large tyre circumference, but the the rim size is also much bigger. So the amount of tyre that you see on the sidewall is much thinner than it currently is with the enormous great balloon tyres. And essentially what that means is there's a lot more space, a lot more area inside the wheel rim, which could be used for things like brakes. So at the moment, the circumference of the brake disc is about just smaller than the internal diameter of the wheel rim. So when we go to these larger and low profile tyres and rim sets, yes, there will be an opportunity to run different brakes, larger brakes, potentially thinner brakes, and different brake duct arrangements that enclose the whole thing. It will depend on how the rules are written. And what we haven't got yet for 2021 are any concrete regulations. I would say that the teams will always go for more stopping power should it be available. It just depends how the regs are going to be written. But potentially, absolutely, we'll see along with that a big change in the way that braking on these cars is designed, and therefore the effect that it might have. Matthew Steer, this has been a popular question as well. What happened to the pace of Max Verstappen? He was quickest of all when he was on the softs. When he switched to the ultras, that quick pace disappeared. That Red Bull car worked very, very well on the soft tyre. The soft tyre, in fact, was just the best tyre around that racetrack for the race. It was the only tyre that didn't get destroyed very quickly when you start pushing on it. The Hypersoft didn't last very long at all. The Ultra Soft lasted a little bit longer, but still not very much. And even Max said himself that within, I think, 3 to 6 laps of getting onto that Ultra Soft tyre, the left front really started to go away, to lose performance, start, initially graining and then potentially blistering after that. So it was all about the, putting those tyres under the stress that they were under those temperature conditions around that racetrack. They didn't last, long enough. So the balance on the soft tyre, which was the tyre they were always going to do as much of the race as they possibly could on, was the way that the car was set up. It was set up for the soft tyre. It worked incredibly well on the soft tyre, and it went for a long, long way into that race, still delivering performance. And unfortunately, when they switched onto the Ultra, it just destroyed the left front and the performance disappeared. He wasn't able to push anywhere near as hard. So that's the reason the pace disappeared. And it was the same for Daniel Ricciardo. Matthew Butcher says, do you think Ferrari should switch Raikkonen and Leclerc for the remaining races to settle him into the team before next year? And do you think there should be bonus points for pole and the fastest lap of the race? Okay, so a couple of questions there. Do I think Ferrari should switch Kimi and Charles Leclerc? No, I don't. I don't like to see that during a season. I can understand, the benefits of it, perhaps, but it's way more complicated than just doing that. There are contracts in place at each team. It's an absolute minefield. I'm sure if there was a massive desire to do it, it could probably be smoothed over with a bit of cash going in all directions. But it's an absolute minefield. Sorting out driver contracts for a complete change of team halfway through a season is not the easiest thing to do. And, I think that stability is what both teams have got right now with their driver pairing, and I think they need to keep it that way. The second part of your question, should we get points for pole and fastest lap? I definitely don't think we should have points for fastest lap. I don't see the point in that. Excuse the pun. I don't see the reason for doing that at all, because the fastest lap of the race is nothing, is it? Anybody can get that. Fernando Alonso could have got that fastest lap in yesterday's race if he'd popped a set of Hypersofts on and gone for a couple of laps flying towards the end, and yet he was one of the slowest cars throughout the race generally. So it's an incredibly false measure data point, isn't it? The fastest lap of the race. Pole position, though, I think there is an argument for giving points out in qualifying, and actually this weekend sort of highlighted that, didn't it? You imagine I mean, look, on one hand, okay, let's give a point for pole position or 3 points or whatever it might be. It really drives that battle at the front, puts a lot more importance on it, but only to a certain extent, and it only affects the front two teams. But what about if you gave points, the race points, to everybody on a Saturday as well? You know, so where you qualify, you'll get a certain number of points for qualifying as well, maybe half points, I don't know. But look, we had a situation on Saturday where, you know, 5 cars didn't even bother. And that's just not good for Formula One. I completely obviously understand the reasons for it, and it's part of a wider problem that we have right now in Formula One. But, you know, force everybody. It's a similar thing to when people are almost trying to qualify 11th because they get a free tyre choice. Qualifying for me should be about everybody giving it everything, making their cars at the absolute peak of their performance level and going for it to see what the ultimate lap time the car and driver can deliver. And if everybody does that and we get a pecking order of who's quickest over a single lap, well, look, let's give some reward for that. Let's give some points. Let's give, you know, I could see that working. I know that would be a controversial viewpoint, but it's not really something I've thought about before. But since you asked the question, why not? Let's consider it. Stuart Grindlay says, Mark, do you consider K-Mag a hard racer or a danger with his collection of moves over the past seasons? No, I see him as a hard racer. I actually like K-Mag. I think he's great. I think, you know, we should have characters like that in this sport. People who have, you know, a bit about them, a bit of aggression, and they are not going to let somebody get past. For me, that's what a racing driver should have. He should have absolute fight in his belly at all times, and you know, at almost any cost, as long as it stays within the rules. And this is the thing, any of these things have got to stay within the rules. If they're not within the rules, it's up to the FIA and the stewards to sort that out and stamp it out. Like, I don't mind it. I think there should be a bit more or a bit less cleanliness about our sport. I think it should be a little bit gritty at times, as long as it stays safe. So yeah, I think K-Mag's great. I think he's a hard racer. I think he's a credit to the sport. He's a young kid, and he's got, you know, he's actually quite experienced now, relatively. But I think he's developed into a good driver, and I like him. Archer Wark says, what batteries do they use in F1 cars? And do they use, or can they use, superconductors instead of batteries? Maybe that's what Ferrari are using. So batteries are a real area of a Formula One car that's still shrouded in secrecy. And actually the regulations are relatively vague. I mean, if you consider what the rest of Formula One technical regulations, how detailed they are, the energy store regs leave a little bit of openness. So there's a lot of work goes on in that area from the teams, and that's why it's so shrouded in secrecy, because no one wants to give up the performance advantage that they've gained. There's a mix of batteries and ultra capacitors generally. That's what we know of. There may well be other things, but we don't know yet. So ultra capacitors and batteries. The reason there's a mix is because what you want from your energy store on a Formula One car, I mean, when you think about your mobile phone, you know, you're probably going to charge it up once a day, and generally you can afford to charge that over the space of a couple of hours or whatever. It doesn't have to be rapid. We'd all love it to be charged in 5 minutes, but that technology is not in these things just yet. With a Formula One car, what you're looking to do is charge it up incredibly quickly over the space of a few seconds under braking. You want to cram in as much energy from that braking zone around the racetrack, force it into the battery as quickly as possible, and then when you get onto the accelerator and use the ERS to start powering you down the straight, you want to discharge that battery at an incredibly high rate as well. Your mobile phone, you charge it up relatively gently and you discharge it incredibly gently over the course of a whole day, more or less. So very different, and that's got a lithium-ion battery in there. Well, a Formula One car, some people are having a mix of the two. Some have got ultra capacitors, some have got lithium ion, and they give different properties. I mean, you know, there's so many things to consider when talking about batteries in a Formula One car, because you've got to consider the weight of the thing, you've got to consider the shape and the packaging, that you can fit that into the overall aerodynamic package of a car. You've got to consider the rate of charge and discharge, and the level of energy density storage that you can put in there as well. So the different methods of doing that give different properties generally. So that's why some teams have tried doing a mix of those different types of materials to store the energy. So the answer to your question is no one really quite knows exactly what everybody has got. No one still quite knows what Ferrari are doing, apart from the fact we do know they've got a split battery, or a split energy store rather. Probably one supplying the MGU-K and one supplying the MGU-H. But beyond that, we don't really know the details of how that works. But I guess to give you some kind of answer, there is a mixture of different battery or energy store technologies up and down the pit lane. Sam Bowen says, F1 has long ago shed its connection with tobacco advertising. It's since developed a strong drink-aware policy. Is it then morally acceptable to build a pro-gambling stance in the tie-up with ISG? Well, look, this is always going to be slightly controversial. Personally, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's a bit harsh to compare gambling with tobacco advertising because, tobacco 100% is bad for you. Drinking and gambling can be bad for you, but if you do it in moderation and do it sensibly, it doesn't have to be. And that's a big difference between tobacco and the other two things you mentioned there. So personally, I don't have an issue with it. I think it gives people a choice and another added way to interact with our sport. And the people who now run our sport, i.e. Liberty, have come into this thing to make money out of it. So I'm not surprised they've done it, and most other big sports do it. Personally, I don't have an issue, but I know some people will. Right, let's finish with this one. And this is from, apologies if I get this name wrong, Naji Zaina. Hi Mark, I had a question about weight limits on the cars. I assume most teams set up their cars right at the lowest weight limit allowed. How do teams account for variances in the weight of the driver? Meaning, what if the driver gained 1 or 2 kilos in between races or lost too much water weight at the end of a race? Well, good question. But the team are constantly monitoring the weight of the driver. So the driver will be weighed on a Thursday when he arrives at the racetrack. He may well be he'll be weighed again, of course, at the FIA scales over the course of a race weekend. The team will get the printout from the FIA scales that gives those weights, including the driver weight. And so they'll be constantly monitoring his weight and adjusting the ballast of the car to suit. And they'll build up a database of that over the course of a season, and they'll be able to compensate for any losses and gains over the course of a run-of-the-mill weekend. Places like Malaysia, of course, Singapore, you might have to compensate for a tiny bit more because they'll lose a bit more weight over the course of a race. But these things are all very carefully factored in by the engineers. Right, I better leave it there, I think, because we've probably rattled on for way too long again. But thank you. It's testament to all the questions that come in. There are some great ones, and I still love them, and I'm still trying to answer as many. They're still coming in now as I'm looking at these. More are popping up. I'm still trying to answer as many as I can on YouTube and on the social media channels, wherever you've put them, using hashtag AskElvis. By the way, the reason that I ask you to put hashtag AskElvis is because when I search for them, that's what I type in. I type in the search hashtag AskElvis, both on YouTube and on Twitter and Instagram, and that brings up everybody that's tagged, that hashtag in there. That's what makes it easy for me to find them. So if you don't put hashtag AskElvis on the question, there's every chance I just won't see it. So apologies if I've missed any. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you liked the video. I hope you have a great Monday. I'm off to McLaren in about an hour's time for a meeting. It'd be nice to go back there again. And, I'll see you tomorrow for Electric Tuesday.